morning. Welcome to the Morning Momentum. Today being Wednesday, 17th of July, 2024. This is a daily compendium of local and international news, human interest stories, current affairs, and expert opinion. My name is Alfonsoh. Use the hashtag Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. The hashtag is Morning Momentum. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines on the papers this morning. We start with the Standard. Paralysis as Gen Zs turn heat on counties. Now, at least 23 governors felt the wrath of youth protesters when the residents took to the streets to demand accountability and good governance from the county bosses. Some leaders sought the protection of private guards and supporters wielding rungus, but these were disarmed and the message got home. That story is beefed up for you on page 5 of the Standard this morning. 23 counties were affected by yesterday's demos. Now, on to other story. This is the cabinet we want, Kenyans tell Ruto. Now, whereas successive regimes have ignored Chapter 6 of the Constitution when it comes to statecraft, a majority Kenyans want it to be the pillar of the next executive. Issues such as selfless service, face of Kenya, meritocracy, they say, should be considered in the appointment. Should cronyism, nepotism be factored, then populace will reject appointees. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On the other hand, the pledges, President William Ruto has promised to form a cabinet that is broad-based and one that will unite the country. He has said those who will serve in the executive will be men and women dedicated to service and have the country's interest at heart. He has promised to rein in on corrupt officials in government and trim the number of advisors on top of banning Harambees. That story is also beefed up for you on page 2. Let's get up close and candid with the Standard. On page 2, Kenyans looking for people with integrity to sit in the next cabinet. Now, Church warns Ruto not to pick politicians as CSS. Young people say they are tired of recycled leaders. That story is augmented for you on page 2 of the Standard this morning. On page 3, lawyer now says Kware murder suspect was forced to confess. Collins Jumaisi Halisha will be remanded for 30 days. His alleged relatives in Vihiga say they do not know a person by the DCI's given name. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 3 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 4. Fear, anxiety at county offices as youth turn heat on governors. Now, goons armed with identical rungus clash with protesters amid looting of businesses. County staff keep off offices and vehicles parked at police station as youth demand accountability. You want to catch up with more of that on page 4. On page 5, chaos in Nairobi streets, 3 shot in counties. Now, police killed protesters in Kibwezi and Kitengela towns amid heightened tensions. Scores of others were injured during the day-long confrontations across the country. You want to catch up with more of the Gen Z protests beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the Standard this morning. Moving on to page 6, Gen Zs occupy Ruto's backyard despite police using brute force. Now, they marched to Turkana, Baringo, Kericho, Nyandarua, and Narok County headquarters. 2 protesters sustained injuries as police fired live ammunition and lobbed tear gas. That story is covered for you on page 6. On page 7, Gen Z goons clash in Kakamega and Kericho. In Kakamega, individuals armed with rungus and wearing masks assembled along Kenyatta Avenue. At least a dozen protesters were injured while traders were left counting losses. That story is also augmented up for you on page 7 of the Standard this morning. Lastly, on the Gen Z protests on page 8, busy schedule for president as demos resume countrywide. President Ruto puts on a brave face at State House, Nairobi, meeting dignitaries. On the streets, the Gen Z protested against lack of accountability in government. That story is covered for you on page 8. On page 9, Ruto's emerging half-truths on numbers and what he must do. Now, President has a huge task to regain public confidence, especially among Gen Z. Did the spending cuts he spoke about exceed 20 billion shillings? Well, you want to find out about that on page 9 of the Standard this morning. The budget cut uh, is at 346 billion shillings, and that is the amount President Ruto said would be cut from the annual budget after the controversial Finance Bill 2024 was withdrawn following Gen Z protest. But now the question here this morning is, did the spending cuts he spoke about exceed 20 billion shillings? That story is augmented for you on page 9. On page 10, counties set to lose 20 billion shillings if Senate approves Ruto's proposal. Now, President wants shareable revenue reduced from 400.1 billion shillings to 380 billion shillings. Many senators have criticized the move and promised to shoot it down when it is tabled. That story is beefed up for you on page 10 of the Standard this morning. On page 11, 15 officers in Indians abduction case protest. Now, police officers accuse court of being used to delay their release on bail. DPP has now approved fresh charges of murder instead of abduction. That story is beefed up for you on page 11 of the Standard this morning. In Kakamega County, drama as teachers storm insurance firm. Angry teachers stormed Minet Insurance Company office in Kakamega town and locked it up on Wednesday. The teachers, members of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, accused the insurance broker of alleged negligence, which they claimed led to death of at least 2 colleagues. That story is covered for you on page 11. Now, from Kakamega County, we shift gears to the expert opinion this morning on the Standard. Leaderless approach challenges established political practices. Now, in an era when traditional political systems appear obsolete and wasteful, Generation Z is questioning the status quo. Witness the emergence of a leaderless movement as Kenya youngsters band together in protest of justice, renouncing reliance on figures or party affiliations and demanding good governance. On page 13, it's all about if the number of counties should be reduced to 24. Asha Obwola, a political strategist, says yes, Kenyans will get value for their taxes if the number of counties are reduced to 24. On the contrary, Michael Kishoyan, Narok County representative at UNFPA Youth Advisory Panel, says no, it is likely to cause ethnic tensions. That story is beefed up for you on page 13 of the Standard this morning. Moving on swiftly to county news on the Standard this morning, traditional practices help resolve modern land disputes. Now, this is in Taita Taveta County. Alternative justice system aims to alleviate court backlogs by settling conflicts outside formal courtrooms. In patriarchal societies such as Maasai, where women face challenges in property ownerships, AJs has helped a lot. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 16 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at the figures. 300 cases have been solved satisfactorily through alternative justice system in Kajiado County following a community-based approach. In Migori County, staff with fake certificates to face full law. More than 25 Migori County staff who submitted their resignation letters after being found with fake academic certificates are not off the hook yet. The county rejected the resignation letters and directed that the staff face disciplinary action. Yesterday, County Secretary Oscar Olima said the staff must go through ongoing disciplinary process that will determine the next course of action. Audit by Kenya National Examination Council revealed that 93 county staff had forged KCPE and KCSE certificates to secure employment. Consequently, Governor Ochilo Ayako's administration removed the 93 staff from the county payroll. The 93 employees risk being dismissed from public office and face arrest should they be found culpable. That story is beefed up for you on page 16. In Mombasa County, court orders DPP to verify land documents. Ashanzu Law Court has directed the Director of Public Prosecutions to authenticate documents produced by Sheikh Al-Hadi Ahmed's lawyer, Abubakar Yusuf, to support a claim that he bought land for his client. More of that story on page 16. On the Standard Enterprise this morning, it's all about building a startup ecosystem. Key lessons from Israel. You want to catch up with that article beefed up for you inside the Standard this morning. Now, let's take a look at page 17. Africa tops global road death rates with pedestrians, cyclists worst hit. NTSA says 2,407 people have died on the roads this year. PS says plans underway to establish a trauma registry. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. In Meru County, Kavira faces ouster bid amid push to dissolve her government. Meru County Assembly is planning a third impeachment motion against Governor Kavira Mwangaza. This follows a petition from residents to President William Ruto asking to dissolve the Meru County government. In response, the governor said, and I quote, "Let's seek a fresh mandate if the MCAs continue to sabotage my work," end of quote. Assembly Majority Leader Patrick Mutuma said while he had seen the petition, he didn't believe it was the route to take. Well, let's move on and take a look at page 18 and page 19 of the Standard this morning. It's all about death and destruction as Kenyans demand good governance, protests against new taxes. So you have the pictorials of yesterday's Gen Z protests across the country, augmented for you on page 18 and page 19 of the Standard this morning. Let's move on and take a look at business news now in the Standard this morning. Murkomen's last act burdens Kenyans with high pump prices. Statement by the former CS has been interpreted as the government being mischievous. State tinkered with the pump price but used subsidies to reduce prices. That story is beefed up for you on page 20. Let's take a look at the figures. They say numbers don't lie. 25 shillings is the road maintenance levy now, from 18 shillings per litre of petrol and diesel after 39% increase by the state. So the road maintenance levy has risen from 18 shillings to 25 shillings by rising up by 7 shillings. In the energy sector, KenGen to add 42 megawatts of solar power to grid. Now, Kenya Electricity Generating Company KenGen is to add 42.5 megawatts of solar energy to the Seven Forks area to scale up Kenya's green energy development. The project is expected to last for 28 months. The additional capacity will not only scale up renewable energy, but also cushion Kenyans against the rising cost of power. It will complement the hydroelectricity generation during the day and save water for electricity generation at night, especially during drought. Some good news there by KenGen. Still on the energy sector, 4 million customers update power meters. More than 4 million Kenya Power customers on prepaid meters have updated their tokens in the ongoing Update Token Meter Yako campaign. The promo targets are to update 7.4 million prepaid meters by the August 31st, 2024 deadline. That story is beefed up for you on page 20. Now, let's move on now and take a look at the international news. Kagame secures fourth term in office with 99% of the vote. Democratic Green Party candidate Frank Habineza mastered 0.53%, Felipe Mpaimana 0.32%. Now, with 65% of the population aged under 30, Kagame is the only leader most Rwandans have ever known. That story is beefed up for you on page 22. On page 23, in America, J.D. Vance is Trump's bold choice for vice president, but can he secure victory? Donald Trump has put a youthful, loyal gladiator for his Make America Great Again movement on the Republican ticket, hoping J.D. Vance transformation from blue-collar Rust Belt to senator can help him secure victory. A White House candidate often chooses a vice presidential running mate who can appeal to new categories of voters or compensate for acknowledged weaknesses in terms of image or policy. That story is beefed up for you on page 23. For the motor vehicle lovers, you have the Motor Digest article beefed up for you on page 25. Stay away from salvage repaired vehicles is what they say today. Now, with that, let's take a look at sports news on the Standard this morning. We start with Copa America, the party that almost ended in a tragedy. Poor pitches, half-empty stadiums, and crowd trouble spoil sport for America's passion. Tournament hosted by US criticized as near failure amid concerns for 2026 World Cup. That story is beefed up for you on page 29. On page 30, Omanyala vows he will not feel games hit like it was in Tokyo. He flopped in the last Olympics and vows to assert himself in a few weeks. He says he has prepared himself and will not develop cold feet. This is all about the Paris 2024 that is coming up in the next 9 days. Let's stay a little bit on Paris Olympics now. Paris mayor to swim in Seine ahead of Olympics. Now, the mayor of the French capital, Anne Hidalgo, is set to take a long-awaited dip in the Seine on Wednesday to demonstrate the river is clean enough to host the outdoor swimming events at the Paris Olympics, her office said. Let's take a look at page 31. Rift Valley school games set to kick off amid high expectations. The games begin today in Bomet County. A number of new entrants have exited the crowd. That story is beefed up for you on page 31. Now let's take a look at the cover page on page 32. Mbappe says dream has come true at Real unveiling. French superstar Kylian Mbappe was officially unveiled as Real Madrid player yesterday, telling 80,000 fans, "My dream has come true." The striker, who had completed his medical earlier yesterday morning, signed a 5-year contract and was handed a number 9 shirt by the club president Florentino Perez. Lastly, on the Standard this morning, end of the road for England's man of near misses. Gareth Southgate transformed the English team into a consistent force after decades of underachievement. He leaves job as second the most successful manager, but fails to win a major trophy for England, which has been waiting since 1966 World Cup win. Now, with that story, we take a quick break here on the Morning Momentum. See you on the other side of this broadcast with more stories on the Daily Nation.
Je, wewe ni mfanyabiashara katika sekta ya elimu, afya bora, usafiri ama unamiliki kampuni yoyote ile? Ungependa kupata fursa ya kutangaza biashara yako ili kuwafikia wateja zaidi? Usikonde. Runinga ya Younib inakupa fursa ya kupeperusha matangazo kuhusu bidhaa na huduma unazotoa kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari za simu 0750344700 ama kupitia barua pepe marketing@younibtv.com. Jinyakulie leo. Younib TV, ever the best.
Ever the best. Hallelujah. You know what, good folks? This is the Coffee Talk, and I, one and only the grandpa.
How do you merge motherhood with all this? At what point do you get time with your daughter?
I have to say, motherhood is bittersweet.
Welcome to the Younib TV.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Sage himself.
Nini unaweza angalia useme ulifanya impact moja, let's say Kangemi, kama ni hapo Parklands, nakumbuka kuna time tuliekanga show moja ikajaa. And today in our coffee talk, as we enjoy our cup of coffee and unwinding their evening. There is a difference between being a cheater
and a liar. Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference, there is a thin line between a cheater and a liar.
Very good, people. This has been the Coffee Talk Show with I Think Grandpa. And you know what, good people? Life has solutions. It's only that we do not speak. And if we do, we fear. We have solutions. But sometimes when we get these solutions are distorted. Keep it here at Coffee Talk, where the conversation starts and never ends. Join me every Sunday from 5 to 6 p.m. for great conversation here at the Coffee Talk. Younib TV. Ever the best.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining the conversation, you are rolling with the host with the most. Alfonsoh Ouma is my name. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the stories making the headlines on the Daily Nation on the front page. Protest deaths now hit 50 this morning. This is the landmark death toll crossed yesterday. Sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, friends and loved ones killed since the start of anti-government protests a month ago. Most of the deaths have been attributed to use of excessive force by the police in dealing with the large Generation Z, who are largely youthful protesters, according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. The numbers have been piling up since June 18th, when provisions of the Finance Bill 2024 stirred up anger across the country. That story is beefed up for you on page 5 to page 8 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 2. Collins, I was tortured to confess quarry killings. Magistrate allows the police to hold the suspect for 30 more days. Police had earlier said that the suspect had confessed to killing a total of 42 women. Now, confessing in private is different from confessing in court, and you have seen what the police have done by making all sorts of allegations. These are sentiments by lawyer John Ndegwa. Let's take a look at page 3. Police probe Nakuru student Eileen's death. Police have so far arrested 2 suspects and are looking for a third one to assist them with the probe. She was found dead near the Ever-Ready roundabout along Nakuru-Eldoret Highway on Sunday morning. This is a top story making the headlines on page 3. On page 4, let's now talk about the youth protests. 50 more than just a number as a nation devours its children. Most of the deaths have been caused by excessive use of force by police in dealing with the protesters, says the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Now, 50 are the dreams sent to the afterlife, the young people killed before they could see the brave new Kenya that they were fighting for. Such a sad state of affairs there, and the story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5. Let's move on to page 6 and stay a little bit with the youth protests. Running battles, cloud of tear gas, and arrests as youth-led protests resume. No one spared. Police in Karatina lobbed tear gas canisters in the open-air market, leaving traders counting losses, while in Nakuru, they entered a church and beat up people as they pursued protesters. You have some pictorials of what transpired yesterday on page 6 and page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 8. Who really is behind the deadly protests? Controversy. Ruto on Monday claimed US-based charity Ford Foundation is among those behind the demonstrations. There have been contradicting claims from the state-owned financiers of the demos. But the big question is, who really is behind the deadly protest? That story is beefed up for you on page 8 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 10. Gachagua, the biggest loser in possible Ruto-Raila pact. Ruto has announced plans that could see Raila's ODM party join the Kenya Kwanza administration. There are fears such a deal could push Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua out of the government. That is a top story making the headlines on page 10 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 12. Ministry releases list of counties with high prevalence of malaria. At least 75% of the Kenyan population is at risk of contracting the disease. Over the past 12 months, Kenya recorded a total of 5,447,220 malaria cases, with Busia County leading with 231,307 cases. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. Let's take a look at page 13. Farmers get 2.5 billion shillings more for cheap fertilizer in mini budget. Other areas in the agriculture sector have suffered major budget cuts. Treasury has increased fertilizer subsidy allocation to 10 billion shillings from the 7.5 billion shillings approved by the parliament last month. That story is covered for you on page 13. Now let's take a look at the beneficiaries. We'll be having 202,512 farmers set to benefit from the subsidized fertilizer following the increase in allocation. 93,283 tons of fertilizer that the government plans to distribute with the increased allocation. All right, let's take a look at the expert opinion. Dalliance with the West made Ruto unpopular. Now, it is indeed these IMF conditions that have made him increasingly unpopular, with many accusing him of abandoning his bottom-up manifesto. Sentiments by Peter Kirui. Now, let's take a look at page 15. Mr. President, get rid of advisors. If you bring a new lot before you do a thorough reorganization of portfolios, and you will have engaged in an exercise in futility. Also, these are sentiments by Jaindi Kisero in Matters Governance, and that is the expert opinion on the Daily Nation this morning. On the motoring, DN2 motoring, today is all about before you rush to jumpstart your car. If you have cold starting problems, it is worth having the underlying cause attended to. For the motoring enthusiasts, you're gonna catch up with that article inside the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at county news. We start with Meru County, where locals call on state to do more to curb cattle raids. They are calling for a security operation as pledged by Kindiki last year. Bandits in jest refer to region as their ATM, referring to the ease with which they raid it. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. Let's stay a little bit on page 17 and take a look at some other counties briefly. We start with Lamu County. Health boost in 29 million shillings upgrade. The devolved unit has put up a 29 million wing in the Makowe Sub-County Hospital, housing maternal and child health, trauma, and orthopedic units. The county handles about 3,500 orthopedic and trauma cases every year, many requiring complex surgeries and which have always had to be referred to Mombasa. In Kajiado County, 4 seized over electronics theft. Police in Kitengela are holding 4 men suspected of being part of a gang that is behind a spate of burglary and shoplifting cases in the town. In Baringo County, EU county in bid to restore lake. The county government has entered into a 14 million euro deal with the European Union to rehabilitate the degraded Lake Baringo catchment. This comes amid concern over the impact of human activities on the lake's ecosystem. That is county news on the Daily Nation this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the international news. We start with US. Biden dealt major blow by labor unions cold feet on endorsement. The Teamsters endorsed Biden in 2020 as well as Clinton in 2016 and Obama in 2008. Biden's team once viewed Teamsters endorsement as all but inevitable. That story is beefed up for you on page 18 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at briefly in other countries. Cairo, Oman mosque shooting kills 4 as several are hurt. 4 people were killed and several wounded by gunfire in the vicinity of a mosque in Oman, police said on Tuesday. In Berlin, Germany bans a right list magazine over extremism. Germany's Interior Ministry has banned Compact magazine, accusing it of being a mouthpiece of the right-wing extremist scene and inciting hatred to Jews and foreigners. It is said Compact had been working against the constitutional order and ordered property searches in 4 states. That is in Berlin, Germany. Let's move now to Moscow. 6 wounded in Ukraine attacks on Russia border. Ukrainian attacks caused a fire at a factory and wounded at least 6 people in the town of Korenevo in Russia's Kursk region, local governors said on Tuesday. 1 person was wounded when a drone dropped an explosive device on a private household elsewhere in the region, interim governor Alexei Smirnov said. In Karachi, 8 soldiers killed in militant attack on base. Islamist militants attacked a military base in northwestern Pakistan, killing 8 security personnel, the military said, after a suicide bomber rammed a vehicle loaded with explosives into a perimeter wall. Security forces killed all 10 assailants targeting the base in Banu. That story is beefed up for you on page 18. Let's take a look at business news on the Daily Nation this morning. A third of firms see tough times on costly debt. Poll findings lay bare the hopes and fears of entrepreneurs. Unfavorable rules and supply chain disruptions paint bleak future for businesses. The figures stand at 36 firms that do not see sales growing in every quarter. Briefly, in real estate, Kenya's prime office uptake up to 75%. Kenya's prime office occupancy rate grew to 75% in the first half of the year, compared to 71.5% or a year earlier. That helped by lower supply of new units in a market that has suffered a glut for years. The latest Knight Frank Africa report shows that a gradual return to the office following the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has helped boost up the uptake of Grade A office space. That story is beefed up for you on page 20. Now let's move on and take a look at sports news on the Daily Nation this morning. Now we start with cricket. Kenya-Nigeria battle for T20 series crown. West Africans saw off the hosts yesterday with 14 runs win at Sikh Union. Teams will then face off in two one-day internationals on Friday and on Saturday. That story is beefed up for you on page 27. Let's move on and take a look at page 28. Minnows look to make their mark in Bungoma. New winners will be crowned in boys football in absence of Shanderema. This is all about the secondary school games that are kicking today. Let's take a look at other news here. Hosts Kaplong ready to shine in Rift Valley Championships, still in secondary school Term 2 games. Let's take a look at page 29. Southgate leaves England job. Who is next for the hot seat? It is expected that the Football Association will go for another Englishman. England manager announces his departure less than 24 hours after Euro 2024 final loss to impressive Spain. That story is beefed up for you on page 29. On page 29 still, motorsports anti-doping action is resolute and indiscriminate. Now, the devil, as they say, knows no age limit, and he can manifest himself in the mind of even the youngest developing human brains. You want to catch up with that story on page 29. Let's move on and take a look at page 30, sports news. Kenyan champions Gor turn to Tanzania for CAF home matches. Now, police hoping Nyayo Stadium will be cleared to stage their conft home tie. That story is beefed up for you on page 30. On page 31, it's all about athletics. 1 hour 42 seconds, 66 milliseconds at 21 years. Kidali quietly plotting for Paris. Kenyans have won the last 4 Olympic Games, 800 meters men's finals. His coach Nakil tips him to do well, saying the former sprinter has what it takes to win gold. That story is beefed up for you on page 31 of the Daily Nation this morning. Countdown to the 2024 Paris Olympics coming up in 9 days. Let's take a look at the cover page of the Daily Nation. NYS cannot account for over 1 billion shillings, audit reveals. Service found to have more senior staff than what is allowed. Projects worth hundreds of million shillings remain incomplete despite payments. So this is a report from the Auditor General Nancy Gadungu. Also, 69 billion shillings go to external debt repayment in July. Kenya will spend about 533 million US dollars, translating to 69 billion Kenya shillings, servicing external debt this month, putting a fresh strain on forex reserves that were recently replenished by the proceeds of a World Bank loan. That story is beefed up for you on the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, with that story of repayment of 69 billion shillings, we come to the end of today's session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV, in a special way, the Morning Momentum. We love you and we appreciate your time. By extension, all gratitude goes to all those who made this broadcast a success behind the lens: Raphale, Wangila, and the Chief Controller, Anifa, Kavira. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful Wednesday. I have been your host, Alfonsoh Omar.